Okay, part 4. So, how do we handle sexual relations between men and women? Okay, so virginity is a thing in humans, okay? And I think that it's something which came about physiologically, i.e. we're talking about the hymen here in a female. That is the little membrane that covers the entrance to the vagina, which demonstrates with not 100% efficacy, but is a strong indication of virginity. Now, why do we need virginity? Why is virginity prized? Okay? Why is virginity prized? You can't say it isn't. It is prized. Okay? Because it's an indication that the child the woman bears will be yours from a male perspective. It's a proof, shall we say. That's the intention of it. I mean, why else would there be a hymen? There's no other purpose for it. So, I think it came about as a social, as a biological. It sounds strange. I don't know how long it would take for, in terms of evolution, for such a device to come to the fore, i.e. for a hymen to develop as a sexual piece of social indication of something. Anyway, the point is we have that in human beings, in females. Not in every situation, but most. So, virginity is prized because the male then knows that he's the father of the woman's child that she's pregnant with. And to bolster that, we also had social conditions whereby marriage followed certain guidelines. For example, no sex before marriage. And on the marital night, one is expected to have sex that night. And the honeymoon is the, shall we say, the sweet spot, I think. I think that traditionally the women of any tribe or society would know the menstrual cycle of the girl, and they would know when she was most fertile, and they would give the marital date. This is my opinion, right? I think that the women would be the ones who would decide when the girl was ready to be married and would be most fertile, so that when her husband obtained her on the marital night, they were most likely to conceive a child. And that would also minimize the possibility of premenstrual tension, or whatever we want to call it, occurring, which would serve to harm relations between the new couple, potentially. That's what I think. Okay? These biological functions are perfectly normal, and we know that the word moon is synonymous with a woman's menstrual cycle. Okay? You know, her moon was a traditional way of describing the menstrual cycle, because it's approximately a month-ish, and so is the lunar cycle. So honeymoon, to my mind, means the sweet point in her cycle when she's most fertile. Makes sense? Makes sense to me. It's logical and rational and reasonable, and biologically sound in those terms as well. So we used to have rules, and what have we got now? Nothing. No rules at all. But we're still humans, we're still biological organisms and machines, and we still function the same way as we always have. Now, we've tried to doctor it by introducing artificial estrogen and progesterone compounds to try and manage a woman's menstrual cycle, which again it's a massively affected society, because women's temperament is also heavily dependent upon her cycle. Oh, you can't say that. I'm saying it. Men don't have that issue. Our temperament's even. Sure, so we can be hotheads, but we're not governed by a monthly cycle. Women are. And it can make them, in some cases, incredibly irrational, and it can affect their judgment, and it can make them really unreliable. Always has done. The pill does treat that. Makes a woman's temperament much more even. I'm not going to say in every single case, but generally speaking, a lot of doctors will prescribe it for that reason, so that a woman can actually function, as they put it. Although I think nowadays women functioning is women being put under tremendous pressure to function in a situation where a lot of them probably shouldn't be. Anyway, my point is, what do we do regarding sexual relations between men and women? I think that we have to accept fornication, but then what did we do before? Not everyone was some perfect model of restraint and avoided having sex before marriage. However, marriage was usually done a lot earlier than we are doing it nowadays. Here's an example for you. It's my understanding that in Romeo and Juliet, Juliet was 14 and Romeo was 21, 22. So they were going to, or had, sexual relations at those ages. Now, let's go with 18 as a marital age, historically. Is that really the case now? No. Young people are having sex in their early teens. So, what do we do? Well, pornography is not what I would suggest is a good answer. When I was in my teens, I was exposed to that. It wasn't good for me. So, what do we do? Well, we like to believe that young teenagers aren't going to have sex or won't want to have sex. And it's incumbent upon a girl to preserve her virtue, shall we say, in this regard. But it's not, no pressure is put on a boy in that regard. Now, that's just a fact, that's the way things are. And it's not some societal construct, as some feminist lunatic would have you say. It's just the way, biologically, that we are, as animals. There's a lot more pressure put on a girl to preserve her virtue, because if she gets knocked up, to put it bluntly, and you don't know who the father is, then what? Then you have the burden of raising a child. That's why we have the notion of a shotgun wedding, where the father points a gun in the direction of the boy who is responsible and says, "You're going to marry my daughter." Now, we can't have a situation where we ignore our physical desires and needs, but pornography is no good. So I think that we have to have some sort of acknowledgement and understanding that sex is going to happen. And look, if we were to really go back to the roots of humanity, there was no age limit. More than likely, there was no age limit put on sexual interaction. And a boy's urge would make him attractive to a female, and he would, the people in the tribe, I suppose, would notice what was happening, and then an arrangement might be made. Or a boy would be encouraged to pick a bride somehow. I don't know how things worked. All I know is that what I see at the moment is a bit of a weird mess, and I'd like it to make more sense. I'd like it to be more rational and more reasonable, but also to serve people. And I don't think pornography is the answer. I think it's bad. So I'm looking for this sort of middle ground. That's why I'm making this video, because I don't like what I see. And what's the alternative? Well, sexual relations. But they have to be in accordance with what's decent and right and wanted by people. We have to have a rational understanding of what sex is, to everybody, to women, to men. We have to understand what it is and why it is, and stop pretending certain things are true when they aren't. You know, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that women don't have sexual urges. Of course they do. They should. It's differently run to male sexual urges, but they have them, of course. You know, a young teenage girl who is ovulating will experience, I'm sure, periods in her cycle, not periods as in period, but, you know, parts of her cycle where she's enormously easily aroused. It's normal, it's natural. It's probably when she's most fertile. And she comes into contact with a young man who is equally full of testosterone. The chance of copulation is pretty high. Which is why, you know, we've got expressions like lock up your daughters, blah, 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 you know. So we have to, I think we have to acknowledge these things, respect them and understand them, and not, the solution isn't pornography. You might say, oh, well, it's a healthy way. Well, it's not healthy for the people involved in it, is it? It's not healthy at all. It's not healthy. It's bad. And it's out of hand. I really don't think it's the answer. And you might think, well, okay, fine, you've bleated on about this for half an hour. What is the answer? Well, I'm going to suggest that it is fornication. It's we become more understanding of sex and accepting of sex. But pornography isn't the answer, because it ruins a man's self-esteem, and it's bad for society because the people involved in it are degrading themselves, and it just harms the spirit of society. Whereas sexual union between a male and a female, even of a younger age, when they are sexually mature physically, at least enough to understand their desires and express them, that's more healthy, provided it's obviously what's the word, when both people are into something, you know, it's not coercive. That's preferable to this ruination of morals based upon depicting sex in video form. It just, to my mind, sex is a private thing, truly. I don't think it's something that we should just throw around, but I do think it needs to be rationally understood and accepted. If you're telling me that kids nowadays are going to wait until they're 16 years old to have sex, you're in a dream. You're in a fantasy. Alright? Having said that, maybe we aren't involving our youngsters in enough activities to keep them active so that they're not indulging in such things. I don't know. But I see what I see around me. I don't like. We don't have rules. We don't have standards. We have this free-for-all, and it's a mess. And I think it's as a result of feminism and liberalism, which is a ruleless idea. And I think that in society, with men in the leadership position and in charge, we have rules and regulations which serve everybody. I mean, the rules and regs that we've always had were there to serve everybody, men and women alike. And they've just been attacked and undermined wholesale and thrown away. And now we've got situations that are getting out of hand. So I'm suggesting that we've got to sit down and think about such things as these and actually come to understandings about them, instead of brushing them under the carpet, because eventually they just become situations that we can't handle. Now, I've probably talked enough about this for now, but these aspects do need to be talked about in society, and not talking about them makes them get out of hand and makes them dangerous. And if men are sitting thinking, well, we can't say anything because everyone's going to be upset with us, that's got to change too, because this has to come from men, and it's in the interests of women as well. It doesn't mean women can't be involved, but we have to start talking about it honestly, instead of thinking, oh, we can't say this because someone might be upset. Sorry, that's not going to fix society at all. I hope that what I've said in these videos makes sense to people, and that it's grounds for people to start thinking and talking, and we can start, being rational about society and how to run it. That's all I got.